there, and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm Blondie.
And I'm T.
Have you heard about that guy in Las Vegas that killed somebody in a bus bench?
No, you know I don't watch the news. It's too gory for me.
Well, this is gory. So the clickbait was murder suspect caught eating victim's face.
Really?
Really? So a 29-year-old man named Colin killed another man named Kenneth in Las Vegas. Apparently, they were at a bus stop. Colin said Kenneth attacked him first, which triggered a violent attack against Kenneth. Colin explained he was homeless, but that some force possessed, yes, I said possessed him during the attack due to a 5-day sleep deprivation. At the hospital, Kenneth was pronounced dead with a severe gash in his head and his eye and ear missing.
Oh.
Pause for reaction.
Oh my God.
Right? When police arrived at the scene, Colin had been covered in biological matter. He said he attacked Kenneth with his teeth and subsequently ate his eye and ear.
But, okay, so he said he did it. The question is, why did he do it?
Because he had a 5-day sleep deprivation and he was possessed.
Okay, because I know when I'm awake for a few days, I start craving eyes and ears. I mean, that's just perfectly normal, right?
Apparently, it is in Vegas.
Oh, good thing he wasn't awake for 6 days, because then I start, craving a nose.
Throw that in for dessert.
A little salty treat.
Oh, a la boga.
A la moco.
I just saw that today and I thought, oh my goodness, how?
Oh, God, people are freaking freaks, man.
And I always thought in the world of animals, don't they always eat like the soft, fleshy parts first, like the cheeks and the stomachs and things like that? Why go for the ear and the eye?
Well, the eye's pretty soft and squishy. I've told you about my dissecting a cow's eye, most disgusting thing I've ever done in my life.
Yes, I remember that.
A texture I can't even describe. But the ear and all that cartilage? Yuck.
Maybe he needed to clean his teeth after the eye. I don't know.
Maybe it's a palate cleanser.
You're just wrong.
That's all I can come up with.
Oh my God. You're so bad. And I haven't been to Vegas in years. Now I see why.
Yeah. Don't ride the bus in Vegas, whatever you do.
Ugh, nasty. Gosh. So what do we have this week? Anything new and exciting, interesting?
Well, this week I decided to get back to our roots. Good old serial killing.
Yay, the gore.
You're welcome.
Love that gore.
I think everybody does. Those seem to be our most popular episodes, is when we get all into the gore and the gruesome and the cutting and the killing. People love that stuff.
And what does that say about our listeners? We love you.
What does it say about us is what should be more important. So this story is about the Kansas City butcher. This one goes back to the 80s, with blue eyeliner and sweatshirts off the shoulder, big wide belt. Remember those days?
Yes, feathered hair, Aquanet, and remember those? Yes, all the bangles on your wrists.
Oh my gosh, right? The good old days. But this story is based in Kansas City, Missouri. And Kansas City, Missouri is a beautiful midwestern city known for its rich jazz heritage and famous for its world-class barbecue.
Yum.
I know, now I'm craving it. But it's also known for another bit of dark history. In the mid-1980s, the Kansas City butcher was creating his own legacy in this town as one of the worst serial killers in history, committing unthinkable and gruesome crimes against young men.
Oh.
Robert Andrew Berdella, Jr. was the owner of an antique business where he sold his vintage finds at flea markets in the Kansas City area. Now, see, he and I could have been besties if he would have just stopped there.
Right.
I freaking love vintage antiques.
I love antiques.
Come on, Robert, get it together. He seemed like a reasonable guy and appeared perfectly normal. People who knew him liked him just fine. In fact, he seemed like a pretty decent guy who went out of his way to help young men who were in need for years. Nobody had a clue of what he was truly capable of, and that he was hiding a very dark side.
Okay, I heard dun 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 sound when you said he appeared perfectly normal.
Why dun for perfectly normal?
You just always know when they say that they seemed perfectly normal, there's always something beneath it.
He rented a regular space at a local flea market and got to know his neighboring vendor, Paul Howell, and his nice-looking teenage son, Jerry. Berdella became close with the Howells, even though initially Jerry and his friends mocked Berdella because he was openly gay.
Well, that's just rude.
But according to Berdella, he said that young Jerry eventually confessed to him that he earned extra money as a male sex worker. Now, this was never confirmed, but Berdella remained close with the family and even occasionally helped Jerry out financially when he had some minor legal troubles. Now, even though it sounds like Berdella is alluding to he and Jerry possibly having a little bit of a closer relationship since the teenager was supposedly a sex worker, it was never clarified if any of that is true.
If it was, it sounds like he kind of took advantage too.
For sure. On July 5th, 1984, Berdella was asked to give now 19-year-old Jerry a ride to a dance contest. When's the last time you ever heard about a dance contest?
The 50s?
Yeah, that's really dating this episode. So Berdella gave him the ride. But on the way, Berdella incapacitated Jerry with way too much alcohol. And once Jerry was drunk, he also gave him tranquilizers. Berdella then took Jerry to his home where he administered injections of heavy tranquilizers until the teen was completely unconscious. For the next 28 hours, Berdella continually injected poor Jerry to keep him controllable while he mercilessly sexually abused and tortured him. Jerry did not know that Berdella had sexual sadism disorder, a condition of experiencing sexual arousal in response to the involuntary extreme pain, suffering, or humiliation of others.
And I can't believe there's such a disorder for that.
Well, here's my side note. I'm going to explain it. The word sadism and sadist are derived from the French writer, political activist, libertine, and nobleman Marquis de Sade, who wrote several novels depicting sexualized torture and violence. He was also imprisoned for sex crimes, blasphemy, and pornography. Geez, I know people want to leave their mark on the world, but is this really what you want to be known for? I mean, couldn't he just be like Marquis de Slightly Kinky? Why does he have to be all in?
Apparently, he has to have the background story.
Jiminy
And
Christmas.
blasphemy? Can you imagine if that was punishable crime today?
Right. We'd all be in prison. At one point, Jerry became conscious enough to ask Berdella why he was doing this to him, and he begged his so-called friend to free him. But Berdella continued with the torture to fulfill his sickening desires. Ultimately, Jerry died of asphyxiation by gagging and eventually unable to catch his breath. But when interviewed later, Berdella said he never wanted to kill Jerry. In fact, when he saw him struggling to breathe, he attempted CPR, but it was obviously too late and Jerry was dead. I'm curious why he would even try to claim that he tried to help Jerry with CPR. It would have taken quite some time for Jerry to die this way, so he was watching it happen until the very last second. This makes him look even more monstrous to me.
Exactly. And does he think admitting that he tried to save him after 28 hours of torture makes him look like a hero?
This guy's thinking is so freaking distorted. It's
backwards.
It's horrifying. So after this, quote, unintended murder, Berdella moved Jerry's body to his basement and dismembered it so that he could put the body parts into trash bags and easily dispose of it with the next trash collection. Jerry Howell was Robert Berdella's first known victim. And I'm not buying that this is his first victim and that this is the level he starts with, especially with this being a friend's son who knows you're the last person who was with him. He seems overly confident for this to be his very first time around, don't you think?
You have a very good point. I mean, to the level of murder and disposing of the body is not torture and murder day one. I think we've done enough of these to know by now that you graduate to that level.
Most people do. I mean, what is this guy, an overachiever in the murder department? Day one, he's all in and he's an expert?
I think not.
I think not as well. When police later followed up with Berdella and questioned him about Jerry, Berdella said he dropped him off as planned and never heard from him again. Obviously, the police believed him because he was never pursued further. On April 10th, 1985, 20-year-old Robert Sheldon, who had previously been a temporary lodger at Berdella's home, continued to be an acquaintance, but Berdella didn't really like Sheldon. He found him to be annoying, even though Sheldon had paid his rent on time. Also, Berdella had never found him physically attractive. I mean, like that's a requirement to live there.
I'm telling you, I just thought the same exact thing.
What a douche. So him being around constantly was an inconvenience. So one day when Berdella came home and found Sheldon drunk, he was done with him and decided to make Sheldon his next victim. Berdella claimed that he really hadn't had any animosity towards Sheldon, but he was sick of him, and at that time Berdella needed an outlet for his anger and frustration towards others. So he tries to make something so illogical sound completely logical as to why he needed to victimize this poor man who paid his rent on time.
Exactly. I think it's called eviction if he was sick of him.
Yeah.
Go to a gym, hit what do you call those not medicine bags, what do you call those? Punching bags. Hit a punching bag.
You got medicine ball mixed up with punching bag.
A medicine bag. Hit one of those.
Hit one of those. A doctor's bag as he's walking to go save somebody. Just punch it out. Doofus.
Hey, give me a break.
I'm like, where is she going with this? So for the next 3 days, Sheldon was viciously tortured, and then he was suffocated by placing a bag over his head and securing it with rope. Berdella claims he had to kill Sheldon because he had a roofer coming on April 15th to do a repair. So while the roofer was working, he was completely unaware of the horrors below him while Berdella was preparing Sheldon's body for disposal in the upstairs bathroom tub.
Oh my God, we can't have the roofer hear anything. His justification is astounding.
Don't roofers normally stay on the roof?
Well, unless they're going to take the complete, a section off and they can see down. I don't know.
Couldn't he take him downstairs at that point? I mean, I'm just saying.
And leave him upstairs in the bathroom? He has a basement. Go downstairs.
Exactly. Too many options for this kind of snap decision.
This nonsense.
In June, Berdella came across Mark Wallace, a young man that he had previously hired to help him with yard work. Strangely, Wallace had been hiding in Berdella's tool shed during a severe storm, and he was scared. So Berdella offered to help him with tranquilizers, claiming it would help him calm down and relax during the storm. So Wallace desperately took the pills being offered and sealed his fate as Berdella's next victim. Wallace spent a day under Berdella's control, and he was subjected to torture that ultimately led to his death from the combined effects of drugs, gagging, and oxygen deprivation. Berdella, who actually kept notes and took many pictures of the dark and twisted torture journey he put his victims through, recorded Wallace's time of death at 7 p.m. on June 23rd.
Nothing like a scrapbook for the murderer.
I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. Berdella's had a knack for finding young, struggling men, often estranged from their families, who were drawn to Berdella's fraudulent kindness. He usually offered them work, shelter, and compassion, exploiting their vulnerabilities to fulfill his own dark, depraved desires. Many of these young men seeking help found themselves trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. As a longtime true crime fan, I've thought about what would I do if someone had me trapped and bound, and knowing that they were possibly going to murder me. First of all, I'd fight like hell. But if there was no way out, I think I'd want them to just get it over with fast so there would be less suffering. But then you hear about these miracle people actually escaping and are able to help capture the killer so that they can't keep doing it to other people. So I'd also want to be that person. It's a pretty horrifying thought, though.
It's extremely horrifying. But this is, I think, also why people have become skeptical of others and who they can trust at this point.
I should be skeptical of you. I have no idea what you're capable of. Well, actually, I do, and I'm even more scared.
You know what I'm capable of, but you also know I'm lazy, so we're good.
I know if you have to run, I'm safe.
Seriously, unless we're on the top of a hill, I can roll down the hill.
Yeah, then I'm toast.
Then you're toast.
On September 26, 1985, Berdella received a phone call from James Ferris, an acquaintance who asked to stay with him temporarily. Berdella agreed and arranged to meet Ferris at a bar that night. After drugging Ferris with crushed tranquilizers hidden in his food, he tied him to his bed and subjected him to continuous intense torture for over 27 hours. Berdella doesn't say why, but he claimed that Ferris was the first victim that he intentionally tortured. He even admitted that he sometimes stopped updating his log of abuse, thinking that Ferris was going to die at any moment.
So these other guys, they weren't intentional? What the heck?
In his own world, I guess there's intentional and non-intentional, but it all equals the same thing.
I can't even get in the mind of some of these people.
Well, even as they're trying to explain it, it makes no sense.
The sad part is, though, it makes sense to them.
It always makes sense to them.
Ugh.
While being tormented, Ferris got delirious, but Berdella didn't stop. He wrote in his log that Ferris wasn't even able to sit up for more than 10 to 15 seconds due to his injuries. His next entry was that Ferris had very delayed breathing. Ferris's condition slowly deteriorated, leading to his death, which Berdella cryptically logged as he was 86th, a term from his chef career meaning trash it. Wow, he knew this guy, and Ferris trusted him. This is a new level of cold-heartedness.
Like I said, who can you trust?
Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Just the act of documenting all of his crimes and the condition that his victims were in, even up to their deaths, suggests a level of chilling detachment. Berdella's need for control and dominance was beyond comprehension. Todd Stubbs, a drug user and occasional sex worker, had previously stayed at Berdella's home with his wife in 1984. But Stubbs and Berdella didn't stay in touch. Then on June 17, 1986, they randomly met at Kansas City's Liberty Memorial Park. Berdella was extremely attracted to Stubbs, and he lured him back to his home with the promise of food and sex. Stubbs agreed because he needed money for drugs. Berdella held Stubbs captive for 2 weeks, attempting to torture him until he agreed to be his compliant sex slave. I'm totally getting Jeffrey Dahmer vibes with this way of thinking.
And see, I'm totally getting Randy Kraft vibes with this way of thinking.
We're partial to both of them for various reasons.
Yes, we are.
Stubbs desperately asked for a soft drink and a sandwich, but Berdella refused. I think that might have been a way to try to control him. And Stubbs burst into tears. But after a few days of starving Stubbs, Berdella tried to feed him ice cream and soup, but Stubbs wasn't able to keep anything down now and couldn't even breathe in a sitting position. After 2 weeks of escalating abuse, Stubbs' condition worsened following severe internal injuries inflicted by Berdella. These injuries led to septic shock and his death.
Aw.
This whole they can't sit up is giving me, I'm having all kinds of terrible thoughts because it doesn't explain why, but my brain's going crazy.
And I was going to ask you, do you know why they can't sit up? But part of me really doesn't want to know.
Yeah, I think I know, but I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to say it, but it's giving me
heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, it's giving me heebie-jeebies for sure. In the spring of 1987, Berdella befriended 20-year-old Larry Wayne Pearson, who had told Berdella that when he was a child, he was into witchcraft and wizardry. Pearson stayed with Berdella and helped around the house, but Berdella decided that he'd had enough of Pearson's laziness after bailing him out of jail and realizing he was completely disinterested in employment. After watching the movie Creepshow 2, they drove around Kansas City, and Pearson confessed to Berdella that he had previously made money by robbing gay men. This finalized Berdella's decision to capture Pearson. So after sharing a meal, Berdella drugged Pearson, then tortured him in the basement.
His moral code of what is okay and what is not is seriously out of whack.
Yeah. Robbing gay men equals murder and torturing him.
Ugh.
Bounding Pearson's hands above his head, Berdella brought in, catch this, an electrical transformer to escalate the torture.
Oh, because what he's doing now isn't enough.
I think, he just wanted something else to do the work for him. Isn't that what it sounds like?
It appears so.
When Pearson was compliant, not that he had a choice, he was moved upstairs as a reward. Berdella said Pearson was the most cooperative of his 6 murder victims, which is why he kept him alive for 6 weeks. Pearson learned to sleep without moving so he wouldn't piss off Berdella and get tortured. But one day, in an act of defiance, Pearson bit Berdella and cried out that he couldn't take it anymore. So Berdella responded by fatally suffocating and bludgeoning him to death. Then he buried his body in the backyard before taking himself to the hospital to get treatment for his bite wound. It doesn't say where he got bit, but I'm very curious.
I'm surprised that he buried him first and didn't go straight to the hospital.
You're right. Once Berdella got really intoxicated at a bar, and some very thoughtful people drove him home so he wouldn't drive drunk. But during the ride, Berdella began confessing to abducting and torturing young men. But these nice people thought he was just really drunk, and everything he said sounded impossible to believe, so they blew it off. Of course, not their fault, but if only one person had thought to at least notify the police, just in case. I mean, I may not have thought to do something like that before, but now I think I'd make a report after hearing all the stories that we're telling.
You know it. And don't even come to me play confessing, because the next knock you hear at your door will definitely be the police.
For sure. Don't mess with me like that. I'm too tainted now.
Right. Apparently, they didn't listen to their true crime podcast.
No, they did not. Educate yourself, people.
Because we are the source.
And we talk about how twisted everybody else is. But Kansas City embodies the midwestern spirit of friendliness and trust, where residents enjoy community interactions. However, this trust and tranquility was shattered the day before Easter 1988, when the unraveling of Robert Berdella's sinister double life began with his next desperate victim. At 1 a.m. on March 29th, Berdella kidnapped Christopher Bryson, a 22-year-old male sex worker, by offering money for sexual services. But once at Berdella's residence, Bryson was walking up the stairs when he was knocked unconscious by a forceful blow to the back of his head with an iron bar. He wasn't messing around.
No.
He was then immediately injected with drugs and tied to Berdella's bed. Bryson was subjected to a series of sexual battery and torture. Berdella said to him, quote, "The only thing you need to think about are you, me, and this house." End quote. That's an odd thing to say, isn't it?
What did that mean?
I'm guessing maybe he's saying, like, don't think about anything outside of this house and me, but you can control a lot of things. You can't control his mind.
That's just wackadoodle.
Yeah. He really did have an extreme need to control.
Apparently everything.
Yeah, very unrealistic. Days into his captivity, Berdella started to trust him and indicated a willingness to compromise certain elements of the anticipated torture, but made it clear that he would not lighten up on his sexual abuse. He told Bryson, quote, "I've gotten this far with other people before, and they're dead now because of mistakes they made." End quote.
The arrogance. Seriously.
These people, man. But within 3 days of being held captive, Bryson managed to gain enough trust to convince Berdella to change up his restraints, arguing that being tied up by his wrist above his head was cutting off circulation to his arms. Berdella finally agreed to tie his hands in front of him following the sexual abuse.
Oh, well, that's so nice of him. He's such a giver.
It sounds to me like he's keeping these guys in that position of hands tied above their head, like for days on end. I mean, what does he think is going to happen?
I don't think he thinks.
Their arms are going to fall off. You can't do that.
Well, apparently he can, because he can control them now.
Bryson also convinced Berdella to leave a TV on and allow him the remote control when he was not in the room. Throughout this time, Bryson constantly thought about escaping. The next day, when Berdella left for work, he had left a matchbook within Bryson's reach. So Bryson burned through his rope restraints and was able to free himself. Wearing nothing but a dog collar, Bryson escaped by jumping from the second floor window and breaking his foot in the process. He spotted a meter reader across the street, ran to him, and begged him to call the police. The meter reader took Bryson to a nearby home, but the residents wouldn't let the naked man inside. But they did contact the police, however. Would you let a naked guy inside with a dog collar if he was with a meter reader? I might let him in, especially if his foot was injured, because then he can't chase me or anything. But hopefully I could outrun a guy with a broken foot. I don't know.
We all hope we could.
That's another thing I've thought about after doing these true crime episodes. What would I do? And I tell you, I'm hoping I'll be a better person than I think I'd be.
You hope
scary.
you learned a lesson or two.
Well, that's just it. I feel like you learn so many things, that there's so many tricks of injury and, like what's real and what's not. What are you opening your door to? It's so scary to try to help.
I know. And there was a whole crime thing about people in vests saying they were the gas department wanting to come in to read your meter or do something with your gas. Remember that?
I saw something, I don't think it was an episode for true crime, but I did see something else where they like robbed a jewelry store or something.
Yeah, no, the people were breaking into homes.
Wow. 4 police officers questioned Bryson, and he was able to lead them back to Berdella's. Initially, he told them that he'd been kidnapped by Berdella while hitchhiking, and that Berdella knocked him out and tied him to a bed where he was repeatedly tormented. The officers observed Bryson's condition, the dog collar, broken foot, eyes that were beet red and swollen, and the scars and welts covering his entire body. His story rang true. That's more than enough evidence to prove he's been victimized, if you ask me.
So are you telling me if he didn't have the welts, one thing, they would kind of go, it had to be all that? That's just crazy.
I don't know if it had to be all that, but all that together, how do you question it?
Exactly.
2 officers covertly monitored the house while Bryson was taken to Menorah Medical Center. Meanwhile, the remaining officer contacted the Kansas City Police Department to secure a search warrant for Berdella's home. In subsequent interviews at the Kansas City Police Department, Bryson revealed that Berdella had shown him Polaroid photos of many men who appeared dead, warning him that the same would happen to him if he ever tried to leave the property or if he became a nuisance or a threat. Following Bryson's escape, Berdella was apprehended that same afternoon. Missouri law gave detectives 20 hours to justify their detention and confirm charges, turning Easter weekend into chaos as they began to uncover evidence surrounding the city's most notorious serial killer. Though Berdella was known to be condescending towards women and those he deemed intellectually inferior, no one in Kansas City wanted to believe that they had been friendly with and living alongside some kind of crazed sadistic murderer. Some of Berdella's friends even accused the police of framing him. Why does the public always get involved and have such strong opinions before they even know the whole truth? I take a minute to let them prove their case before I rush to judgment.
Thank you. I think today, aren't they called trolls?
I don't know if that's what they're called, but they're idiot trolls.
They come out from underneath a bridge. Now they're just idiots.
Gosh, figure it out first. Figure it out. As law enforcement officers stepped through the door of the home, they were confronted with a nightmarish scene. The house was a macabre museum of cruelty. The search validated Bryson's account of being held captive and tortured in a bedroom where investigators found burnt ropes attached to the bedpost at the foot of the bed and an electrical transformer with wires extending to the bed. There was also a tray filled with syringes, prescription drugs, swabs, and eye drops near the bed. As soon as I read about him having eye drops near the bed, I thought about our previous episode, the one Size Really Does Matter, the Mini-Men murders, and realized that's probably what he used it for. Before that episode, I wouldn't have had a clue and thought maybe he was just, refreshing his eyes or something. I don't know.
And seriously, I thought the same thing when you said the eyedroppers causing illness. That's just crazy. Did you not have visions when they said that the wires were extending to the bed?
Yeah, I have a total visual of this whole room.
Oh my gosh.
What I want to know is how come all the people that wanted to stay with him never noticed anything that the police walked in and noticed immediately?
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, you walk in and you see, and I'm sure smell all of this stuff. Wouldn't
Yeah.
it be like red flags flying everywhere?
Yeah, there has to be a smell. I mean, because if he's doing stuff in the tubs, things are going down those drains and getting caught. There has to be an odor.
Yeah. But then again, when were they drugged? That's the other
Yeah.
thing. If they were drugged before they got into the house or the apartment or whatever it was.
But some of them actually stayed with him. I think it was Ferris. They
Right.
actually stayed there for a while. So how do you not notice?
Men.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he could have said, I'm working on stuff, or whatever, but ugh,
Yeah, the pot roast spoiled in the fridge. Sorry. I don't know.
yeah. Additionally, tools of restraint and torture, an iron pipe, ropes, and leather belt were discovered with significant wear on the bedposts, indicating the struggle of restrained individuals. The presence of a chainsaw, hacksaw, and miter further corroborated Berdella's gruesome activities. An alarming find of 334 Polaroid pictures and 34 snapshot prints in Berdella's house depicted Bryson and other men capturing their torture and their deaths.
Okay, wait a minute. I get the Polaroid, but what's a snapshot? 34 of them? Weren't they developed? I don't get.
He couldn't have sent them out for developing. He had to have
No.
some way of doing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, snapshot prints.
Okay.
The property also contained occult literature and a stenographer's pad with detailed accounts of the specific torture inflicted on each of the victims. Each photograph and each note told a story of unimaginable suffering. It was a window into the mind of a sadistic man who didn't see his victims as people, but human toys for his own sadistic gratification.
Why do they take pictures and feel the need to write stuff down?
Like you said earlier, he was scrapbooking.
Oh, I can imagine what embellishments he would have used.
Oh,
Jeez.
That's terrible.
Sorry.
Okie doke. My mind's going crazy, but I'm not going to say it. Okay. Move on.
Next.
So I have to say one thing because I can't not say it. You know how we always put buttons in scrapbooks? I
Yeah.
was thinking of a belly button. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say.
You're a lot quicker than I was.
My mind just immediately went there. I was like, don't say it. Okay, say it. All right. Back to the story. Additionally, newspaper clippings about Jerry Howell and a wallet and driver's license belonging to James Ferris were also found, highlighting more of Berdella's crimes. The identification of James Ferris was made by his wife after finding photos in Berdella's home, and the identification of his son was made by Paul Howell upon seeing photos of a man in Berdella's basement.
I can't even having the family identify their loved ones through these torture Polaroids. I mean, that's awful.
That would be, I don't know if I could do it, to be quite honest with you. I don't know that I could do that.
I had to identify my father-in-law he had passed away just on a screen. And that was horrific enough. It was an awful thing to see, but to see the torture, I can't.
And that's somebody who I'm sure was photographed, with dignity.
Right. Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so I can't imagine, like you said, how this would affect you. The Kansas City Police formed a dedicated task force consisting of 11 detectives and a sergeant to concentrate solely on the Berdella investigation. This team delved into Berdella's past, uncovering his notoriety among the local male sex workers for his abuse of vulnerable young men. His reputation was marred due to his practice of drugging and torturing his sexual partners. So people on the street knew about this.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. Despite Berdella's denial and the lack of concrete evidence, his status as a key suspect led to surveillance and questioning, which Berdella resisted without legal representation, prompting his lawyer to threaten action against the police department for harassment. Efforts were made to identify other young men in the photographs to ascertain their fates, with detectives comparing new photos of Berdella to those in the Polaroids to match the photographer's body parts visible in the shots. Berdella had to pose for this purpose, Despite feeling humiliated by the photo session, he cooperated, though he resisted certain poses.
Like I said, the friggin' arrogance. Oh my God, I'm humiliated. I'm going to have to resist these poses. Dude.
Disgusting. And what kind of poses is he doing? I mean, again, my mind's going crazy.
At this point, he's not in control, and that's probably what's killing him.
You're absolutely right. Someone's forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do.
Right.
Freddie Kellogg, a former lodger, provided insight into Berdella's abuse, including drugging his lodgers before raping them and coercing Kellogg to bring attractive young men to his home for parties, where they would be drugged and victimized. Kellogg's accounts revealed Berdella's threats of blackmail against anyone who might go to the police. There was a fear and reluctance among the local male sex workers to associate with Berdella due to the rumors that he was involved in Jerry Howell's disappearance.
See, we were right. Here's the escalation.
You're absolutely right. Kellogg was also able to identify 3 victims from the Polaroids, including Todd Stubbs, Robert Sheldon, and Larry Wayne Pearson, detailing Berdella's interactions when he paid the bond for Pearson and the hospital report alleging an assault by Larry Pearson. By late April, dental x-rays confirmed the skull found in Berdella's closet did belong to Robert Sheldon. Tips from the public identified Mark Wallace and reconfirmed Larry Wayne Pearson from photos released to the media by the police. Berdella was later charged with murdering Larry Wayne Pearson after the head found in his backyard was identified as Pearson's.
Can you imagine what photos they had to release? I mean, 334, how many they had to go through to actually find one they could put in the paper?
Right. One where someone's face isn't, twisted and
Tortured.
in pain. And exactly. Ugh, what a horrible job.
No, thank you.
Initially, Berdella was charged with 1 count of felonious restraint, 1 count of assault, and 7 counts of forced sodomy as the investigation into his activities continued. Berdella was sentenced to life in prison without parole, beginning his sentence at the Missouri State Penitentiary. But later he was moved to Potosi Correctional Center for his safety, since sexual offenders often are violently attacked by fellow inmates.
Okay, is it wrong that I think this is an eye for an eye situation? I know the crazy torturing rapist killer has rights, but still.
I see it as street justice, and as long as they know he's guilty, it's on him.
Exactly. There you go.
Nobody would have touched him if he was a decent person.
Well, if he was a decent person, he wouldn't be in prison.
Well, there's people that are in there for not killing others. I mean, they're in there for other things.
True.
An additional life sentence without parole came from a guilty plea for the forcible sodomy of Christopher Bryson, with 6 counts of sodomy and 1 charge of assault dropped in a plea bargain. Despite initial not guilty pleas to 5 other murder charges, Berdella accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, confessing in detail to the crimes committed against his victims. This agreement led to his guilty plea to 1 count of first-degree murder and 4 counts of second-degree murder. How'd they do that? Resulting in 5 more life sentences with an added condition to ensure that he would never be eligible for parole. That's when convicted murderers were actually still scared of the death penalty because it was still being enforced. But as we know, not anymore. Nowadays, they don't give up anything because they don't have to. And all that does is give the families no closure for their deceased family members.
Man, today you and I, our brains are on the same page. I was thinking the exact same thing.
It's a messed up world when we start thinking alike.
A strange world at the very least.
Yeah. It's like, when we're in total agreement, wow, something wrong with that.
Something is not aligning.
Or there's just no denying it.
I'll give you that one.
Berdella provided detailed confessions to the prosecutors, and although more than 20 different men were depicted in positions that implied that they were either unconscious or dead in the Polaroid images, he claimed that he had murdered only 6 of them. Like, that's not that many. What's the problem, right? I'm sure there were more. He just knew they couldn't prove it. Blondie is shaking her head in what I'm sure is complete and utter disgust.
Complete and utter, exactly.
They had photos of 20 different men. Where are the other 14?
They don't have the bodies, I guess, or don't have the proof, so they can't do anything.
Maybe. His confessions offered a glimpse into the dark twists and turns of his mind. What led this disgusting man down such a violent path? Born on January 31st, 1949, in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, which is a quiet suburb of Cleveland, Robert Berdella Jr. entered the world into what appeared to be a typical American family of the post-war era. He was the elder of two boys born to Robert Berdella Sr., who worked as a die setter at Ford Motor Company, and Mary Louise Berdella, a stay-at-home mom. His father was a devout Roman Catholic of Italian descent. His mother was of German and British descent. The family were regular attendees of Mass, and both Berdella and his brother were enrolled in religious education classes.
Very European family.
Exactly, very European. Which, to me, I don't know. Sounds very structured normally. Robert had a speech impediment from the age of 5 years old and wore thick glasses due to severe nearsightedness. He also suffered from high blood pressure, requiring medication as a small child. Robert was bullied by kids and his own father and struggled with feelings of alienation and inadequacy. He lacked strength and had a high-pitched voice, so he retreated into a solitary world of collecting coins and stamps, hobbies that required no social interaction. Robert was often compared to his naturally athletic younger brother and was treated as a disappointment and failure by his father, who also emotionally abused him and beat him with a leather strap. Not justifying any of this, but this was unfortunately more normal than not at this time to have an emotionally detached and domineering father, who worked all the time and wasn't emotionally available. The father role was a little bit sketchy back then.
You're right. It's not fair, but it is the sign of the times. But again, absolutely no excuse. It's sad, but it's that whole masculine thing.
Well, and if most fathers were behaving that way, because that was the norm back then, how come everybody else didn't turn out to be a serial killer? So it's not an excuse. I'm just saying.
I know. And that's a very good point.
Yeah, like everybody should have been jacked. But despite these challenges, Robert excelled academically, showing a great interest in art, history, and cooking. It was during these formative years that Berdella discovered he was gay, a realization that only deepened his feelings of alienation in the conservative midwestern environment. He initially kept his truth a secret and did not openly acknowledge it for several years. He even had a brief relationship with a girl in his early teens that, of course, went nowhere.
Absolutely nowhere.
Thank God for her.
Especially since he had disdain for women, yes.
Exactly. On Christmas Day in 1965, while visiting relatives in Canton, Ohio, Berdella's father suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 39.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's young.
This loss drove him to seek comfort in his Catholic faith. He eventually grew disillusioned with his religious beliefs, though, and decided to study various religions and cult groups, including Satanism. Geez, that's a big jump to the other side.
He went right from A to Z.
No kidding.
Or I should say A to S.
A to SS. He was an ass. In that same year, he was profoundly influenced by the movie The Collector, the story of a man who kidnapped a woman he admired, only to have her die from an illness while in his captivity. This film left a lasting impact on him and built his curiosity of holding a person captive. Following his father's death, Berdella's mother quickly remarried, a decision that Berdella resented. This led him to indulge more in his solitary hobbies, such as painting, coin and stamp collecting, and writing to pen pals from various countries. These correspondences fueled his passion for primitive art and antiques, which eventually led him to start his own antiques business in 1982. After graduating high school, Berdella left Ohio for Kansas City, where he attended the Kansas City Art Institution, also known as KCAI. This period of self-discovery was marred by troubling behavior when he became involved with a group of students engaged in drug use. Eventually, he started selling drugs for profit and abusing alcohol. It was during this time that his life and interest took a dark turn. Berdella started torturing animals and even submitted an art project for college revealing a disturbing fascination with control and suffering while he tortured animals. Torturing animals is a well-documented warning sign in the profiles of many serial killers and is often a precursor to more violent behavior, indicating a deep-seated need to dominate and inflict pain. It absolutely makes me want to vomit when I hear about a person who can be cruel to anything that is living and helpless. It's the most vile thing, and in my opinion, there's no room in this world for people like that.
I say again, take him back to that prison in Missouri and let him know what it's like.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't feel sorry for him at all.
Oh, not at all.
Eye for an eye.
I'd drive him there myself.
Me too.
We'll carpool.
I'd get a speeding ticket taking him there. I don't care. In 1969, after withdrawing from KCAI following harsh criticism from college administrators over the incident involving him killing and cooking a duck, he decided to stay in Kansas City and moved into his final residence at 4315 Charlotte Street in the Hyde Park district. By then, Berdella was openly gay and spent his time with a variety of men, including male sex workers, drug addicts, petty criminals, and runaways, offering them support to overcome their addictions in criminal ways. Berdella said that he felt almost like a foster parent to many of these youths.
Goodness.
Well, in the beginning, though, he really wasn't doing anything to them. It sounds like maybe he really was trying to help them get their lives on the straight and narrow, but then he quickly realized he could take advantage of this. Later, he claimed he became more and more frustrated with these men not recognizing his efforts to help steer them away from self-destructive behavior. So Berdella decided to use these men for his own benefit and eventually engaged in sexual relationships with them. He offered financial support and rent-free boarding at his home. Berdella even worked with the South Hyde Park Crime Prevention and Neighborhood Association. He became their chairman and encouraged neighborhood watch patrols. He left this position in the mid-1980s. That double life was legit.
Seriously.
How crazy is that?
So he was annoyed with their behavior and kept them in line by engaging sexual behaviors. And he was this ideal role model for crime prevention group. That's just twisted.
Yeah, he's a very twisted individual. His professional life included working as a short order cook, selling antiques and art, and eventually his culinary career advanced as he became a senior cook in a prestigious restaurant, even participating in a training program for chefs. By 1981, Berdella focused entirely on his thriving antiques business, having established numerous contracts with national and international partners and ceased his work as a chef. In 1982, Berdella started to lease a space at the Westport Flea Market, opening a shop called Bob's Bazaar. That's kind of cute. I really hate to say that, but it is.
It's cute, but it's very telling.
Exactly. Berdella's shop mainly dealt in primitive art, jewelry, and antiques. Despite occasionally earning a significant monthly income, the profits were not enough to cover his expenses. So to supplement his income, Berdella resorted to occasionally stealing or scavenging items to sell and also took in lodgers at his home.
He is just all over the map, isn't he?
He really is. He's a hustler. He described his murders as, quote, some of my darkest fantasies becoming my reality, end quote. He mentioned how the Collector film he had first seen in 1965 deeply influenced him, especially after his initial shock and disgust following his first murder. This film, he claimed, became a motivating psychological force for his subsequent actions against his victims, who had lost any degree of humanity in his eyes once he had chosen to render them captive. These were not people that I thought of once I had them bound and was using them. They became something other than people to me. He rationalized his actions by dehumanizing them, referring to them as play toys. His victims often were uneducated and were seen as inferior by Berdella, who saw himself as a successful businessman. This mentality facilitated his cruel acts of torture, where he sought to control their every experience, depriving them of all emotions and sensations unless it was administered by him. Berdella denied allegations of involvement in Satanism, though.
Oh, well, thank goodness for that.
Oh, well, he's a decent guy after all.
Wow.
What an idiot. Talk about intellectually inferior.
And successful businessman, what is his definition of that?
Right? You still got to steal and hustle. How successful are you?
Thinking the same thing.
What a doofus. He confessed to capturing his victims after he had unsuccessfully tried to steer them away from their general lifestyles, getting frustrated at the failure of his efforts. Berdella had a depressive personality disorder and was also a diagnosed sexual sadist. For some like Berdella, the need to control becomes an obsession, a way to reclaim a sense of power, lost or denied. Despite his detailed confession, the remains of his 6 victims disposed of in the trash bags were never found.
Poor families.
I know. Truly sad. Incarcerated at the Missouri State Penitentiary, Berdella attempted to clear his tarnished image through interviews, portraying himself as a, get this, sensitive citizen who had simply made mistakes. He claimed he had been, I'll pause for the giggle because it's ridiculous. He claimed he had been demonized and unfairly dehumanized by the media. Quote, Satanism and demonic practices are more believable than me being a neighbor next door who reached a point in his life where he could do monstrous acts. That's not the same thing as actually being a monster. End quote.
Okay. I want to see his dictionary.
He also said that the police department's ineptitude and his being allowed to remain at liberty following his first murder was why he continued to murder. Yeah, obviously none of this is your fault. You're just a misunderstood little sweetheart.
I can't even with this guy.
You can't. It's so ridiculous. When asked why he killed the men, since it was only torture that he was after, he said that he didn't really have a reason. He had just thought that since he wasn't caught after the first murder, what difference did it make if he killed again? And again, and again, and again.
Oh, well, he's already got one, so really, what does it matter?
Yeah. Berdella died on October 8th, 1992, from a heart attack after complaining of severe chest pains when he was only 43 years old. His death was met with little sympathy with the presiding judge at his trial, making a sarcastic remark about his passing. I have no idea what the judge said, but I would have given him a standing ovation for any sarcastic contribution.
And I'm sure the judge said the same thing I'm thinking right about now.
I'm sure he did, and I think we're back on the same page on this one.
This is a little scary, actually.
I know.
His father also died of a heart attack, didn't he, at 39?
At 39.
Wow.
So, I mean, literally, you can say there was something wrong with their hearts.
Mm-hmm. They were black. Yeah, actually, they were both black.
We didn't know his father that well, but his was definitely black.
Well, his father was mean when he was a child, though, wasn't he?
His father's was like submarine gray. Okay, but maybe not black. Following Berdella's death, his collection of artifacts and furniture was auctioned off to cover his legal expenses. Before his death, millionaire Dell Dunmeyer purchased all of Berdella's belongings, including the house and everything in it on Charlotte Street and the art inventory, because, catch this, Dunmeyer said he had no interest in the items, but he felt that he understood Berdella. What the heck does that mean? That sounds really twisted.
Has anyone checked Dunmeyer's house or backyard?
And I'm sure his house and backyard is much bigger. So yeah, I'm a little scared right now. Because someone did that for, what was it? I think it was Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment complex. A very rich person came in and bought everything so that all the creepies wouldn't come in and get anything. It was meant for something good. This guy did it for a completely different reason.
Because he felt he understood him. So,
yeah.
I mean,
maybe he felt like he was a brother from another mother. I don't know.
The twist never ends.
Right? For years, the Berdella house stood empty, and it became known in Kansas City as the House of Horrors. Dunmire eventually demolished the house and sold the empty lot to neighbors.
I'm sure they appreciated that.
I wouldn't buy that. No way. I would have moved. I wouldn't be on that same street.
Not
No way.
anymore. No way, no how.
In the end, Berdella died very young, and I would be surprised if anyone shed a tear. And thank goodness the house was torn down and all the memories within it died with him. But it's still unfathomable to believe that this man never understood how despicable his actions were. Even though his victims suffered severely and begged for their lives, he had the nerve to say, quote, "My actions were not for pleasure. They were only for my physical and mental satisfaction," end quote. And I hope his new demon buddies are satisfying their wicked desires with his soul for exactly the same reasons.
We can only hope. Well, thank you for bringing that demented story to us.
You're so welcome.
I'm just floored how this guy actually had the audacity to think that he was better than everyone else in the world.
People are just unbelievable.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to take care and don't forget to let your grimaginations run wild. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, Twitter at grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook, Grimwit with Dimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.